Okay, thanks. It's good morning for me, but I know it's good afternoon for a lot of people. Really happy to be here. I've known Sergio for many years. Just met Gary and really fond of what they're doing. And Wade and I have worked together a number of times over the years, so happy to get to see Wade as well. So as Sergio said, I work at McGill University, which you can see is in the top right-hand corner of my slide, where I'm a professor of sports psychology. And whenever I give a webinar or a presentation, I always like to give a shout out to all of my current and my former graduate students who have really done all the hard work and put in the time. And you can see a photo of some of them in the top left. I'm sure a few of them are even attending today's talk. So thanks to all my grad students. Not only do I do my research in coaching and youth sport, but I've spent a lot of years, almost 20 years, coaching as well. I have three children, all of whom play or played youth sport, two sons and a daughter, and I've been coaching them in ice hockey, no surprise, I'm in Canada, but also baseball and soccer. So this is a real passionate topic for me, and I'm always happy to do research on something that I love doing. Um, and again, just before I get started, I always like to talk about the research that I do and how much I enjoy it. And over the years, I've really been fortunate to meet a number of outstanding coaches. You can see in the bottom right, there's Wade and I. We did a seminar for the U.S. Olympic team, and there's a coach, Anson Dorrance, who's a very famous women's soccer coach who we got to meet. And on the left there, you'll see John Wooden, somebody else that has influenced both Wade and myself. And we both had the good pleasure to meet him on a few times before he passed away. And he's had a big influence on the research that both of us have done. So just before I sort of got into the nuts and bolts of today, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about who I am. Sergio and Gary gave Wade and I a number of topics to choose from. And these are the two that I sort of decided I was going to focus on today, which would be coach learning and how you can build a positive culture by managing difficult athletes. So when it comes to coach learning, there's a lot of us in coaching science who study either the formal learning of coaches and the informal learning. I'm sure a lot of you are here, have taken your formal learning, coach education courses. I know in the UK, we have a very similar pattern to what we have in Canada, and it's a very structured and important way of coach learning. But there's also informal learning, which talks about the experiences you had as an athlete and coaching, your interactions with other coaches, and your mentoring. And there was a quote that came out in 1989 by Sage that really, I think, encapsulates the type of work that I do. And he said it is primarily through informal learning experiences such as reflection, mentoring, and communities of practice that coaches begin to get a feel for what coaching is, how coaches behave, and how day-to-day responsibilities are filled. And it's really this quote and informal learning that has really had the most influence and impact on the research that I've done. And I decided that I would share for each of the two topics that I'm going to talk to you about, that I would pick sort of a research article that had a really strong applied focus that would help me share with you some of the knowledge that I think is important, and in this case, about coach learning. So this is a study we published 3 years ago called Creating and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. Insights from Accomplished University Team Sport Coaches. We had 6 coaches from university sports in Canada who had combined to win more than 30 national titles. So very, very successful on field, on court, on ice success. But these were also coaches that were recognized for the way they developed their team and created these cultures of excellence. So we spoke to them about how they learned to create this culture of excellence and what they learned along the way going to so many national championship games. And I'm going to talk about 3 specific results from this study. The first one is self-reflection. And I'm going to read you a quote because I think it really talks to you about what I'm trying to share. One coach said, I was an inexperienced and young coach the first time we went to nationals. That's the national championship. I did not have an experienced staff. We lost that championship, and I felt like it was my fault. After that first time at coaching at nationals, I went back and wrote notes for myself. What not to do to win a national championship. Panicking, feeling angry, trying to control all players and support staff behaviors. You cannot do these things. Another thing that helps these coaches learn and get better is interacting with other coaches. I still go to a lot of conferences, said this one very successful coach. The good thing about coaching conferences is that you meet a lot of people, but you have to ask questions. A lot of people do not ask because they are afraid, but I tell them, ask the question. I am a fanatic of getting better. I have learned by reading books and by talking with other coaches. And the third topic that I want to talk about is, if you know my research and what we do in our lab, mentorship is a big one. And not surprisingly, it came out in this study. And one of our coaches said, I have a mentor. She has shown me that she really trusts me and that she is proud of what I do. She has mainly helped me to improve myself. Her mentoring has nothing to do with the name of my sport. She has never given me any advice on the game. She makes me feel that what I do is okay. She is always there to answer my questions and to show me that she is happy with what I do. So if you're looking at coach learning, I have three take-home points for you. And I really think these points carry over to whether you're coaching youth sport or high performance sport. And the first thing is, and I think Wade might talk about this as well, because we've been talking about this since we were graduate students 25 years ago, is learning through your own mistakes, through self-reflection. It's really important to self-reflect, and it's okay to know that you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Reach out to others for wisdom and advice. Go to conferences, develop communities of practice, find other people to talk to, and cultivate mentorships. No matter what level you're at, mentorships is a great way to learn. Finds if you're, and that's as a mentee or as a mentor. You can learn both ways, but it's a valuable learning experience. So that's my talk on coach learning, the first half of today's talk. The second half is going to be managing difficult athletes. And when I was trying to put together this topic, again, I was trying to figure out what might resonate with the people that are listening. And then I thought, well, who doesn't who doesn't have difficult athletes to coach? Let's face it, we all do. And there's a study that was just published this year in the Psychology of Sport and Exercise that actually addressed this topic. And actually, let me stay here. Our participants were coaches of elite ice hockey players aged 16 to 20 years old. So this is sort of the drafting level just before professional hockey. In Canada, hockey's a big sport. So we were very fortunate to get sort of the top developmental hockey coaches in Canada to talk about how you handle difficult athletes. And when we started this topic, we looked at the 80-20 rule that's basically in business and industry that says, managers spend 80% of their time dealing with their difficult people and not enough time with the people who are performing. There was one study that did this, and they talked about coaches and they talked about cancer athletes. And they said, if I spend 80% of my time with the negative players, not enough time is spent on reinforcing positive and good behaviors. So true, isn't it? Of course, we all deal with that. So what I'm going to present to you today are some strategies for actually managing difficult athletes, how these coaches dealt with it. The first thing that you need to do is identify them early. And granted, these coaches said that as they gained more experience, they were better able to do this. So those of you who are inexperienced, it may take some time, but the key is trust your gut, identify them as the people early. One coach said, the most important thing when you have a difficult athlete on your team is identifying them as quickly as possible. So I think we all get that, we all buy into that, but what do we do with it? Well, one of the things our coaches said, and this was really neat, was that one of the things they tried to do was avoid putting a negative label on an athlete. And And sort of centering that athlete out as a problem athlete. They said the minute you do that, you're going to lose the athlete and it just sort of self perpetuates. What they tried to do was transform this athlete into a contributing member of their team. One quote said, "You never want to identify players as troublemakers or something that's going to become a reality. You don't want to brand them as troublemaker because I find that it perpetuates the troublemaking." Coaches found that it's really important to connect with their athletes on a personal level and treat them with respect. And they said this was even more so for the difficult athletes. A lot of times, the difficult athletes had grown up in very troubled environments, and that's why they were acting out. So these coaches said it's really important to try and reach out to them. One coach said, "I'm a big believer that coaching is about relationships, and you have to get to know your players to coach them. You have to coach your team consistently, but you must have an understanding that everybody on your team is a different person. You have to get to know them well enough to know what makes them tick." After connecting with them, you got to show the athletes that you care for them as human beings. And this is something that coaches have told me over the years. It's important to connect with athletes. One coach said there aren't too many 16 or 17-year-old kids who are going to lay it out on the line until they know that you care and have a really solid relationship built. And again, this goes from grassroots levels all the way up, and I think is even more so for the difficult athletes or the ones who are giving you some hard times. What can we do to sort of help and facilitate this transition? Our coaches talked about the other people who are on their coaching staff. So it could be the equipment manager. It was always assistant coaches. They placed a big premium on team leaders. And if you're not coaching in youth sport, or if you are coaching in youth sport, maybe not as much, but certainly having mature, responsible veteran players help, mentor the young players help. And we also talked about in this study billets, which are families where the players were living because they were living away from home. So they were living with a billet family. So our coaches said it's important to have these other people, these other actors on your side to help with the facilitation. One coach said, "I think that in order to have a good relationship, your off-ice staff, your coaching staff, and your support staff have to be on the same page and have to share information freely and openly." So my final, just wrapping up here, my take-home points on difficult athletes. First thing, identify them early. Second, set clear rules and expectations for them. But by doing that, you're also trying to build a high quality relationship and show the athlete that you care about him or her as a person. And lastly, reach out to important others. Don't try and do this alone. Get everybody on board and try and go in the same direction to turn this athlete around before you actually cut the athlete from your team. And it did come up, and our coaches said there is a time where you do have to cut bait, but they don't do that right off the bat. They try to go through all these different steps to facilitate a transformation. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.